Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put a light mist over the whole thing, and notice the distance I'm at. Don't want any overspray over here or down here. I'm about, I'd say, a good 15-20 inches away. Like our blending in our practice sheets, I just want to chuck an overall mist over it first. Okay, and then we'll come in with our textures. And what I want to do is just get an underlying texture. I'm going to use the smaller area of this texture, and I'm going to look. So I do a little bit and then I look. Is that the tone that I want, the value? I'm watching for this edge, overspray wise. So I'm just doing an overall texture. Switch it around so it doesn't look all the same. And I'm just moving around, but I'm watching for this edge. I'm always keeping the airbrush pointing into the stencil so I don't get any edges to it. And I'm just creating a very light mist of texture, slightly darker than the mist that we had behind. And then what I'll do is I'll pick in a few areas, I'll just make it that little bit darker. And then some real dark. The way I'm making it real dark is I'm just sitting in that area a little bit longer than I normally would. So overall mist, get some texture in there, watching for my edges. I'm just moving around, getting some texture across the entire piece. I will zoom in a little bit closer so you can actually see it. And then I go slightly darker again. And then I go for some real dark areas. So it mixes it up. Try and use different areas of the shield when you're doing the darker areas so it doesn't all look the same. Just misting over again, making it slightly darker, but I can still see my texture. If you start to lose your texture, because obviously the darker we go, the more texture we're going to lose, so go back over a few areas because you want that texture to really show through. This is great for things like rocks and bark on trees and any kind of foliage. You can even use it in metals. It's a great stencil to have in the range. It comes with, it's in a set I think online. You can have the texture and you can have the stars and shines for starry skies and stuff like that. But it's one that's definitely in my range. I use it quite a lot. Even in human faces, portraits and things like that. If there's a lot going on in the skin, I'll use this shield as well. But this is just a simple exercise. I'm watching for my overspray edges. I'm just going to use a few dots here and there as well. And now I'll mist over. Don't want it too dark, but I don't want it too light either, because we need to show light and dark on our water droplets. So I think that should do it. Just a light mist. That's the kind of shade you need. I just realised that the camera's pointing more at this square, so I'm going to show you down here that bit with getting the overspray around the edge. So if I was to go too close to this edge and be too far away, this is what happens. You get an outside edge to the stencil. So we don't want that to happen. I've got to be mindful of my rose and the overspray onto the rose. But yeah, so you know, when you're using the stencil, make sure that because you're far away, that spray pattern is going to go really wide, so you always have to be conscious of the overspray. So try and keep, if I was to do the same thing but keep it pointed into the stencil, I can still get a dark area without that hard edge or overspray edge. So be mindful of the direction that the airbrush is facing. Okay, let's start our water droplets. So first thing we're going to do is I'm going to use the bigger square. I just gave it a bit of a clean so we can see where I'm spraying. What I'm going to do is pick on one of the darker spots, and I'm going to put the water droplet over the top of that darker spot. So I'll zoom in on this actually so you can see it up very close. Okay, so I'm going to offer the stencil up. Again, I'm using my thumb to push it flat. I'll put the darker area in the middle of the circle, and what I'm going to do is hit up here on the stencil because that's my safe area. So being fairly close, hit the middle. You can see where my dot is now. And then once I hit that, I'm going to come down to the edge of the stencil and allow the stencil to do its job. So start to build it up and then pull back ever so slightly, then move left around the stencil, only about halfway. So round there, off there, left and right. Be mindful of our Mickey Mouse ears, as I call them, the overspray. If we come out too wide, we'll start picking up this outer edge, so we don't want that to happen. So I'm going to allow it to build up in the middle a bit more, and then we pull away and we should have a perfect circle, or half circle. Then we find the matching outer circle, which is this one here on this stencil. And we obviously the middle is all safe now, so we can hit the middle, and then we just make sure we're lined up perfectly, and then we come down to the bottom and we just allow it to build in right in the center at the bottom. And there's the start of our water droplet. Make sure you air dry. If you air dry your stencil so it's not too wet, or wipe it with a cloth, so we can come back in and just give it a quick wipe, even with our fingers, just to make sure. I'll do a couple more, so over a bit of texture, maybe here, dead center first, come down, hit almost 50-50. 50% on the stencil, 50% in the center. So you're almost hitting that line. And then move slightly left, and then slightly right. And then allow it to build up again in the middle. Air dry it if you want while it's in place. That way, if you move like when it's wet, you're not going to get a smudge. So if you air dry it as you go, you won't get that smudge. And then we find our circle again, make sure we're dry, which looks pretty good, still a little wet, so I'll dry that up. And then find the shield that matches, and then hit the bottom. And then air dry before we pull away. There we go. So the first part done. I'm now going to switch up to white, opaque white, to put the highlight in. I'm using Createx Illustration White. The reason is it's quite opaque and we want the brightness of the white to come through. For the rest of it and the rose and everything, I was using Shading Black from ETAC. So make sure our white is flowing. Okay, and then we can do exactly the same process as we did with the top part of the water droplet. We come in at the bottom this time, but we only go halfway up. So hit the bottom of the stencil again. You'll see where I hit, just beneath it there. And then I come in and I hit 50-50 on the stencil, and then I push it left and then push it right. And then allow it to build at the bottom, because that's the real bright bit. So here I'm air drying now. Make sure it's air dry before I move away. And if it's bright enough, which kind of looks like it is, I might give it one more blast just to really make it bright. Notice I'm keeping the airbrush pointed upwards into the stencil. There's none of this because of this overspray down here. And there we go. And I'll do the same on this one. Allow it to build, push left, push right, and then air dry. Just the air, no paint. So when I go to pull away, it's not going to smudge it in any way, shape or form. So, and there we go. Okay, the final part is the shine at the top that's casting the highlight in the middle. So you want to be just about 10 mil down, right in the center, and we want to create a highlight. So you have to be in very close, needle almost touching the surface, and we have to control our paint, so you might want to practice on your application tape. Get your paint flowing, push forward, pull back until it starts to come, and then we almost want to create a little bit of a halo, so we pull back ever so slightly. So find your spot, then pull back. You might have to hit it twice in order to get the brightness that you need. So I'm going to go back in on that one again. Same spot, bit difficult because it's the same spot. I'm going to do the same on that one. There we go, 2 water droplets. So we've used the texture stencil, and we've used the circle stencil. So it's getting you used to using those stencils and how they work, how they do the job for you. So when we're using the stencils, it's all about understanding how the shield is actually going to shield the overspray for you. So like we did there, we was 50% on and 50% off, and we allowed the stencil to do the job for us just by moving a little bit left and a little bit right. So hopefully you understood that. Now we can peel our application tape back. We should have a nice little square with some water droplets.